Well, hello. Welcome to the Poetry Foundation's virtual event, the 2020 Drinking Gourd Poetry Prize chapbook launch, featuring Darrel Alejandro Holnes. My name is Alex, and I am the Building and Events Manager at the Poetry Foundation. I use he, him pronouns. I am a white cis man with black glasses and blue-black dyed hair. I'm wearing a black sweater today and I'm sitting at my desk. I have a bookshelf full of books and a vase of flowers behind me. We would like to begin by recognizing that the Poetry Foundation building is situated on the occupied original homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa nations, among other Indigenous nations. Indigenous people continue to live here today, and Chicago is home to one of the largest urban Indigenous communities in the United States. While we are meeting on a virtual platform, it remains crucial that we recognize the stolen resources and land that enable the infrastructures of our connecting tonight. We gather recognizing that some of us are settlers on colonized land and that this land acknowledgement is one small part of disrupting and dismantling the colonial structures in which we are living. And finally, we want to co-create a relaxed virtual space with you all. Feel free to do whatever you need for your body and your mind to be more at ease, if that means eating a snack, hydrating, nursing, lying down, or stepping up to take a break, or whatever else you may need to do to take care of yourself. Take a second now to make yourself 10% more comfortable. And with that, I'd like to introduce Susanna Gottlieb, Director of the Poetry and Poetics Colloquium at Northwestern University, to tell us more about this year's prize.
I am Susanna Gottlieb, and I am the Director of the Poetry and Poetics Colloquium. I am an Asian woman with black hair wearing a black sweater, and I'm in what was until quarantine hit in a walk-in closet that has been serving as my space where I can be on computer undisturbed by the other people in my household. So welcome everyone. I want to thank Alex Benjamin and Noah Fields and Yadalmi Noriega and the Poetry Foundation for their many years of partnership in hosting this annual event, and also for all they do to bring poetry as a relevant and living art form into our communities. We're also very grateful to Parnisha Jones at Northwestern University Press, who agreed to act as publisher for this series, now in its 9th year. And I know I speak for all of us on the Drinking Gourd panel, Chris Abani, John Alba Cutler, Reg Gibbons, Ed Roberson, and Natasha Trethaway, when I say that we are really thankful for all of you in the audience tonight for joining us and supporting poetry and poets with your presence. So tonight we're celebrating the gifted and amazing Darrel Holnes, whose chapbook Migrant Psalms is this year's winner of the Drinking Gourd Poetry Chapbook Prize. This is a series that takes its name from one of the great coded songs of the Underground Railroad, Follow the Drinking Gourd, which is said to have provided a guide to fleeing slaves traveling north in search of freedom, from bondage and also from forced illiteracy, and therefore toward the freedom to imagine and create and circulate the meditations of the heart through the written word. We're deeply appreciative of the opportunity to bring new voices to a wider audience through this series, and especially thrilled tonight to be able to introduce you to the work of our prize-winning poet. Darrel's poetry may be heartbreaking at times, but it's also full of mercy and bracing exuberance. So I hope you'll all enjoy his work as much as our panelists do. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Noah Fields, who will introduce Darrel Holnes.
My name is Noah, and I am the events assistant at the Poetry Foundation, and I use they, them pronouns. By way of visual description, I'm a white trans person with faded blue hair, and I'm wearing a denim jacket over a pink crop top sweater and hearing aids. I'm honored and excited to introduce Darrel Alejandro Holnes with a bio. Darrel Alejandro Holnes is the recipient of a National Endowment of the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship in Poetry. His poems have previously appeared in American Poetry Review, Poetry Magazine, Callaloo, Best American Experimental Poetry 2014 anthology, and elsewhere in print and online. Holnes is a Cave Canem and Canto Mundo Fellow. He has also earned scholarships to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Postgraduate Writers Conference at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and residencies nationwide, including a residency at MacDowell Arts Colony. His poem, Praise Song for My Mutilated World, won the C.P. Cafferty Poetry Prize from Poetry International. He is currently an assistant professor at creative writing and playwriting at Medgar Evers College, a city university of New York, and he teaches at New York University. Please welcome to the virtual stage, Darrel Alejandro Holnes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Migrant Psalms Chapbook book launch. I want to briefly thank Northwestern University Press, the Poetry and Poetics Colloquium at Northwestern University, and the Poetry Foundation for collaborating on this terrific event, and to the editorial board for selecting my work. It really means a lot. And I know that these are unusual times, but thank you to everyone who was able to make the virtual event today. So I'm gonna try to look at the camera as much as possible. I've got my lighting and I've got a little color pop for you today. And I hope that you, I hope that you enjoy what you hear. The first poem that I'm going to read was inspired actually by another poet and another poetry reading. I was attending a poetry reading at the Asian American Writers Workshop in New York City, where Javier Zamora read one of his poems, and he talked briefly about this term OTM, which stands for Other Than Mexican. And it is a term that is actually created by the US government to talk about migrants who are from Latin America, but not from Mexico. And how this term, and I started thinking about how this term has such a negative connotation to it, because it's one that's used in immigration trials when they're deporting, right? A lot of Central American migrants, and what it would mean to reclaim and explore this term, and what it means to sort of be other than Mexican. And I started thinking about all of these really beautiful words that I had learned from my Mexican American and Chicano friends in Texas, as well as from my trips to Mexico, and how slang and all sorts of vernacular differed from the kind of language that we use often in Panama. So I wrote OTM, really inspired by a conversation I had with Javier that night after hearing his poem, and I'm grateful to him and the poetry community for introducing me to this term, and I dedicate this and many of the poems in the book and this reading to Central American migrants who are trying to find a way to a better life. OTM, or Other Than Mexican. Other than que pedo, we que sopa. Other than ta bueno, we ofi. Other than cosa, we vaina. Other than vato, we pelao. Other than amiguín, we friend. Other than coyote, we ride la bestia. Other than mande, we que cosa? Other than no mames, we chucha. Other than culero, we hijo de puta. Other than cálmate, güey, we tranquilo, pana. Other than me vales madre, we me vales verga. Other than peda, we party. Other than chela, we pinta. Other than crudo, we fuck up. Other than el arte de engañar, we juega vivo. Other than pinta, we sopre. Other than llevarse el demonio, we cabrea. Other than huir, we chifiar. Other than chava, shiguial. Other than bonita, shipriti. Other than firmeina, shipai. Other than casita, we chanti. Other than pachanga, we rumba. Other than panzana, we preñada. Other than padre, we viejo. Other than nene, we chichi. Other than niños, they children. Other than fresh off the boat, they gringos. Other than hablar, they speak. Other than vivir, they be. Other than nosotros, they me. Whew. So thanks to Javier for inspiring that poem. The next poem I'm going to read, funny as it is, I started writing this poem in 2008, and I have always pronounced this word as Kyrie, but I recently learned that it's actually pronounced, or it can be pronounced alternatively as Kyrie. And it is a sacred prayer of the Christian tradition, especially in the Catholic Church, that devout oftentimes recite. And I've always been fascinated by Catholicism and spirituality and religion and the different types of form, pageantry, and performance that come out of there, and the amount of art that comes out of those institutions or in association with those institutions. And I use this form to tell my own story, to tell my own coming to America story. And so this is Kyrie, and it's inspired by my first few years in Texas. And I see some old heads here. I see some folks from my undergrad days in Texas. So shout out to them. And thanks for coming. Kyrie. It's 2005 and the Pope is dead. You don't care, but I do, because I'm Catholic. Bush has just been reelected. I am new to Texas and America. Houston is in the Bible Belt. My father used to beat me with when I was bad. I am scared to pull Christ through my belt loops. He never kept my pants up back home. It's 2005 and maybe I'll wear a skirt in Texas. No, Texas is wearing a skirt and I've got mirrors on my shoes. Shh, don't tell her, please. I know you have no reason to trust me, but St. Peter's Basilica is a megachurch, so really I'm just like you. It's 2005 and this country is heaven. So why be a good boy anymore? Gratuitous porn is online America. Women as girls are spanked in videos referencing 1999 with "Hit me, baby, one more time." Pastor's pants sit on his ankles. I promise I'll be a good boy, a good old boy, good old boy. Yes, that's the one. Pray for me, TV Jesus, or Britney Spears. I know I've been bad, but I too want the right to be reelected. In 2005, white smoke announces a new pope. The pungent scent of burning pages hangs. Ashen noose in the air. Quick, light me like a cigarette. Someone have mercy. Please save me from touching or lynching myself. 2. It's 2006 and Twitter is a thing. I don't care, but to you, it's internet poetry. North Korea has just done a nuclear test. 140 characters against our American leader is an act of treason. But ours is a free world, you say. And look, Seoul has no internet, but my soul is made of Wi Fi. So that can't be true. Mother sent me an email chain of Psalm 91. It projects from my face when I'm angry. Twitter invited all who forwarded the email to join its social network. I guess God answers prayers through phishing scams or some other 21st century mysteries. Although perhaps the Twitter thing was predictable, the Bible has so many birds. At the great book of Genesis, God hovers over us like a dove. Hashtag big bird, hashtag big brother. At the badass book of Revelations, birds gorge on the defeated. Hashtag vulture Christ for president. It's 2006 and my second year in Texas. Rihanna sings SOS on white people radio. It reminds me of my mother's love of Tainted Love by Soft Cell when she comes to visit me from 1984. SOS, please, someone help me. Like Riri, I too am dying for someone to help me love this country or myself without being labeled an online terrorist. It's 2006 and free speech is a nuclear bomb. Since the Patriot Act, unless you're North Korea, you say, where a nuclear bomb is a nuclear bomb. But I say, perhaps nukes are just what happens when in 2006 you don't have the internet or Rihanna. You find a way to take over the world instead of just tweeting about it or begging for someone else to save you as you join the sing-along. 3. It's 2007 and Anna Nicole Smith is dying. You know who she is. Yes, that one with the boobs. The iPhone is new, and so are my best friend's breast implants. Her name is Chloe. She's too short to be a model and hates her face in pictures, though I think she's beautiful. Beautiful enough to be my friend. So we dye her hair blonde, so she spends her graduation money on looking like Marilyn, Pamela, Madonna, Anna. So we take selfies of her new breasts with my new iPhone and wait for Perez Hilton to tell us Anna is dead from an overdose. We've been in a hospital waiting room before, waiting for doctors to give us similar news when Rebecca passed away. So it's a little familiar. So we don't do coke anymore. So what? It's only MDMA. Though it's 2007, so some people start calling it Molly. It's my third year in Texas, and I'm still finding so many women to look up to. I'm happy to be a man. My wanting badly to be Molly is the closest I've come to wanting a sex change, you could say, if you want to be provocative. I'm talking about my wanting to get inside an American like drugs do. So deep, I can't be deported. It's 2007 and I'll never love again like I once did inside Chloe. One hand on her new tits, the other snapping dirty pics of us like it's National Geographic in the 70s. And we're both women of color in Vietnam and the cameraman. It's 2007 and Perez Hilton says we've gone too soon and turned into Lucy in the Sky apple pie, floating somewhere in heaven. Obesity is killing Americans, but you don't care because it's 2007 and fat is the new black. So you take a bite and worship us into eternal life. 4. It's 2008 and unemployment is rising. You don't care, but my girlfriend is pregnant, and I'm a poet who's never been a war against poverty. It's 2008 and my last year in Texas. This year, it seems everything I touch turns to gold, except the child my girlfriend loses, like you lose a needle when you're trying to kick the habit and stay middle class. After backpacking through Europe, my baby is somewhere in an American haystack. I wonder if the cattle know what they're grazing. It's 2008, and we both want to find a miracle in her bleeding love as Leona Lewis plays on the radio, singing out as if she too had just bled out a baby. We make love for the last time to Leona's hit song. I keep bleeding, keep bleeding, love. In 2008, Peter's girlfriend is pregnant too. So he gets a job at Starbucks near the Galleria, right where my girl and I broke up. Peter starts going to church again. He hasn't been to St. Thomas since a drunk driver killed his brother on prom night. He was drunk when he knocked up his girlfriend, yet refuses to end another child's life. Every time we hang, I buy him things for his daughter or an expensive steak dinner, hoping it will bandage my wounds. We meet so often that by early October, I'm covered in gauze. By Halloween, I'm broke, but look so much like a mummy, I don't need to buy a costume for the party anyway. Lord have mercy. This year, it's scary enough for me to just go as myself. Christ have mercy. And on the third day of November, help me go back home and commit my body to la tierra, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, nuke bomb to buxom bombshell. No, wait. It's 2008, so Obama is running for president. Glory be to Barack in the highest, and word to the mothers of his people on earth. Am I not worthy? Well, maybe he's come for all his immigrants. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Perhaps we are his Easter people. Perhaps we are his fighting 10. Perhaps we can all be black and broken Lazaruses rising again and again. In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. The next poem is called A Mending Wall, and it is written in response to Robert Frost's poem Mending Wall. And with my poems, sometimes I like a bit of vision revision, where I'm taking someone else's vision and I'm revising it. And there's something about Robert Frost's poem, those S's will get you. There's something about Robert Frost's poem, Mending Wall, that just never really sat right with me. And I remember it deliberately because when I was in high school, we did a whole unit on Robert Frost. And it was just like, 4-time award-winning medalist, all sorts of things. And I was just like, this poem really makes me question how necessary borders are, and what it means to imagine your community. So in response, I wrote this poem called The Mending Wall. If crucified means one has died on the cross, then what is the word in English for dying at the crossing between countries? What word describes when a brown woman's dreams of being something like a white man are killed at the intersection between his dreamt up borders and his dream come true border patrol? White man like dead man printed or minted on money more valuable than the pesos in her purse. White man like gods on horseback come to conquer their India after reading a mistaken map. White man like the grace of misinterpreted omens turned into a chance for vicious attack. White man like buying but outlawing cocaine to catch the brown man in the crossfire of its trade. White man like picket fences and award-winning films about the privilege of being so over privileged that he yearns for something real. Something there is that loves a wall, that builds a boundary, that calls the structure love of country. Something there is that kills those who trespass. Something there is that buries bodies at a border as foundation stones for yet another wall. But something there is that doesn't love, Father's saying, good fences make good neighbors. Something doesn't love a man carving up a continent and its people to make a new world in the image of old words like the name of God, instead of new words like the name of one's own desires. To divide life into here and after by crossing an ocean as if it were the pearly gates. Oh, America. If anywhere there are limits, are beginnings and ends, then heaven has to be a nothing, loving a something, loving its everything. Then life, country, and their borders ain't nothing but a thing.
Thank you, Darrel, and congratulations. Please let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I'm John Alba Cutler. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm zooming from a bedroom with children's art on the wall behind me. I'm I would describe myself as a slightly off-white man with black hair shaved close to my head, and I'm just so grateful to be here tonight, and so grateful to have been part of the jury that selected Migrant Psalms for the Drinking Gourd Prize. And I have to say, my experience of hearing you and watching you perform, Darrel, only confirms the experience that I had reading your poems for the first time, which was an experience of being invited into a range of emotions, from laughter to the kind of gut punch, flinching of the difficulty and the challenge of many of the poems. And one of the things that really stood out to me reading Migrant Psalms for the first time has to do with your poem, A Mending Wall, which was one of the poems that I really love. Because in the last 4 years, I have seen Robert Frost's poem, Mending Wall, shared so many times on social media by very well-meaning people as a sort of response to Trump's politics. And it's a response that it always has felt so flat and insufficient to me. And when I read these lines, something there is that loves a wall, that builds a boundary, that calls the structure love of country, I felt like that was such a perfect rejoinder to the vague sentiments of Robert Frost's Mending Wall. That if you can say there's something out there that doesn't love a wall, you can say, I can point at the thing, the people that do love a wall, that want to build it. I have been thinking a little bit about the very famous passage from William Carlos Williams' poem Asphodel, where Williams says, it is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. And often I think in the poetry world, we have a little bit of a bias against poetry that's perceived as topical, or poetry that is responding to what's happening right now, as if that means that it's not going to last, or it doesn't convey a quote unquote universal message, whatever that means. What I love about Migrant Psalms is that it is urgent, which is the word that I would use to replace topical, that it invites us to look at the world and what is happening in the world and respond to it critically and morally and right away. And so congratulations, Darrel, and thank you for allowing us to be here with you tonight and to celebrate with you. I only wish we could be here in person, but congratulations. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Ed Roberson. I'm one of the judges that chose this book of poems. And earlier I congratulated Darrel. I do that again. And I did write the introduction to the poem, to the book. And I want to jump on it right away to say that, yes, okay, it is topical. It is emotional. It's close to a rant. But one of the things I really want you to pay attention to, the expertise. What a good writer. How well this poem is put together. Let me point out. He says the title of the book is Migrant Psalms. Psalms are, he says, they pray for a way to make sense of what it is to try to make your way in this country. And the poem is like a prayer, but it's very much a prayer, not just for the self, but mostly, if you'll notice, it's for the others. So the first, that one poem, Kiri, which is usually a song of lament, but not only is it of lament, but it asks for mercy. It asks for mercy and it asks for clarification. And I think that's really what goes on in these poems. He clarifies things. Let me make one example. In Kiri, he's got three lines that I'll quote the lines for you. I promise I'll be a good boy, a good old boy. Good old boy, yeah, that's the one. Pray for me. TV Jesus or Britney Spears. Notice how it's not Janis Joplin. This poem is so new, it's beyond Joplin. It's so up to date. It's so present, number one. But when you look at those lines do something else. He not only catches the American vernacular by finding the ending of the choice of three old goods, the good old boy, he catches the American vernacular. But he also catches the modern American history of poetry. That three staggered, a three-part line of Williams. But he catches that thing of Williams of the undecidedness of that line. It takes three lines or three statements to finally say what it means. But he's talking about what it takes for an immigrant to finally come to this country. Which of the languages do I have to use in order to be accepted in this country, is what he's asking. Now that's skill, when you can use all of that lexical level. You can use the music, the insinuation that goes on with that good old boy. So those are the language skills that, okay, he's talking about topical stuff, but not just off the top of his head. This is a skilled writer. And I'm congratulating Darrel on being able to handle a language, being able to handle 3 or 4 languages that way. I think that's one of the things that I sort of would like people to notice. In the poem, other than Mexican, that poem, even if you don't know the Spanish, you could almost dance that poem. It's a skill with the ear that has made that poem so interesting. You don't know the language, but you're ready to dance to it. But if you look inside, if you do know the language, there are other things going on in that poem. he's talking about the different kinds of Spanish that there are. For instance, there's one point where he uses the word, what is it? It's tabueno, which I think translates as "it's good" in Spanish. But in Mexico, it means it's all good. But in Panama, those same words are understood to mean unofficial, in the sense that my papers are good. So in that second poem, OTM, you'll hear him explain those three lines in the previous poem. That's skill, when you can carry an image across two separate poems. Congratulations, man.
Congratulations, Darrel, on the publication of this powerful and inventive chapbook. Now to the audience. Poet Darrel Alejandro Holnes evokes the life or death dangers and heartbreaks of immigrating from Panama to the United States, with gestures of sympathy toward others who have crossed the border or have been prevented from entering. Quote, I write to the mothers who send their children north, never knowing if they'll make it. And once safely across the border, there's a feeling that, quote, I too am dying for someone to help me love this country or myself. With somber clarity at some moments and at others, with inventive, quick-leaping, poetic, and linguistic energy, and intensely startling metaphors, Holnes articulates zigzag inventories of sorrow and love, hardship and flourishing. He transits through desire and anxiety. The title punning poem, A Mending Wall, after Robert Frost, declares in its first lines, if crucified means one has died on the cross, then what is the word in English for dying at the crossing between countries? In the 31 couplets of the ingenious and playful bilingual poem OTM, or Other Than Mexican, Holmes creates an undertone of the sheer wistfulness of multilinguistic speech. Holmes' Kyrie is a cry for acceptance and acknowledgement of dangers and uncertainties. Yet at the same time, this inventory of difficult experience in the US is articulated with both melancholy and ironic cheer. Poetically, it's a bravura oratorio of immigration and settling in Texas.
Adding to that, we also had Chris Abani here, who is also on the judging panel at the Drinking Gourd Prize, who had to run unexpectedly, but he sends his warmest congratulations as well. So I hope, Darrel, that you feel all of the love and good feelings coming at you tonight. And I'm really excited. I know we're running up on our time here, but I'd love to take a few minutes here and do some Q&A with some questions from the audience. The first question that came in is, what advice do you have for young people?
You know, in addition to teaching poetry, writing workshops, I also teach playwriting. And I always tell my playwriting students that you have to be a good listener if you want to be a good writer. And I think the same applies for young poets out there, emerging poets out there, anyone who's new to writing and wants to get on that horse. You really have to be a good listener if you want to be a good writer. And I think, you know, going out in public as much as possible during a pandemic and really listening to what it's like when other people talk, right? To not only capture their voices, but also thinking about the logic that they're building right, in a conversation, the logic to whatever the argument is, and really, really just focusing on the language, right, and looking for links in the language. They'll often repeat themselves, right, to make those connections for themselves so that they can even organize their own thoughts. So that's one piece of advice. And similar but different, keep a journal. Writing every day will help you get over any of those fears that you have associated with the act, will help to quiet the inner editor voice in your head that says, oh, that's not a good line. Oh, that's not a good image. Oh, you should just give up now because all the good stuff has been written and there's nothing good that you like. It helps to quiet that voice. If you have a regular practice of writing, then instead of listening to that voice, you'll be listening to the voice inside that is telling you what to say, right? And I always think that the best art comes from beyond the artist. And so there is a great deal of listening that has to happen when you are a writer. You're listening to yourself, you're listening to those around you, right? You're also listening to the zeitgeist, you're listening to the universe, whatever you believe might be beyond, right? You're listening to that too. Even if what you believe is beyond is nothing or is a void, right? What's echoing in that chamber? That's what you write. So my advice to all of the sort of new writers out there, young and old, is to listen. And it's a skill that you'll develop over time and take some practice. Listen.
The next question that we have in the chat is, how long was your writing process for this chapbook?
Yeah, well, you know, I think of myself as a project-oriented writer. I'm always sort of thinking about books and themes and doing research. A lot of my writing is based on research, but this chapbook came together because I couldn't help but continually write about immigration, the migrant crisis, and it was an ongoing one, right? Not only with Central Americans coming to the US, but globally, the conversation around migration. I went to like an underground rave party in Berlin once, and I'll never forget that I was like looking for the bathroom, wandering through these stairs, and it was super dark. And then I felt like I touched something. I thought the door was wet, and I looked and it was a sticker, and it said, "No border, no nation, stop the deportations." Right. So what's happening around the world with immigration, with migrants. It's not just a US thing. It's not just a Latin American thing. It's not just a Pan American or continental American thing. It's happening globally. It's part of a global conversation. And I kept writing and writing and writing about this topic. And my friend Javier, who is, I mentioned when I was talking about the first poem I read, OTM, Other Than Mexican, we were talking about my poems one day, and he was like, I think this is a book. And I was like, really? But they're part of 5 books that I'm writing at the same time. And it's sort of like, I didn't conceive of this really as just one single project at the time. They were all poems that were attached to different projects, but I'm excited about how it's come together. The oldest poem in the book, which is actually Kyrie, I started writing in 2008. Between 2008 and 2010, when I was in graduate school at the University of Michigan. Go Blue, right? Shout out to any Michiganders out there. I saw a few from my graduate school, from my cohort in here earlier. So shout out to them. And so some of these poems are 10 years old, 12 years old. And that's how it goes sometimes. Some of these poems were also published a while ago individually in journals, but I've only recently gathered them as a part of this project. So I'm really excited about that. And I think that you can just keep writing and writing and writing, and eventually the books will come. That's what my professors told me in graduate school. And it's the advice that I give anybody who's listening now. It actually turned out to be true.
All right, our next question comes from Rosebud Ben Oni. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. And first of all, they say, can we celebrate your glasses and mustache combo? So let's all just take a moment to celebrate the glasses and mustache combo. And then their question is, do you think the future of poetry is more multimedia and digital?
Well, I'm excited by that question, Rosebud, and thanks for asking it. I'm excited about that question because I have always believed that poetry knows no bounds. Thinking about what we refer to as poetry oftentimes starts with an oral tradition, but in many ways has always existed across multiple media. And I think the particularly Western academic tradition of poetry that's been committed to the page is one that the American literary tradition is very grounded in a lot of ways. But even within the United States, there have been forms of poetry that have been outside of that. And I do consider hip hop to be a form of poetry. And that is a very obvious example, right? Um, and so I'm excited by the future of poetry being multimedia, mixed genre. But I also think that poetry has always been that. We have sometimes failed, I think, as members of the academy and these kinds of institutions, we have failed to recognize that often. But it has always been multifaceted and multimedia. And I'm excited by the continued embrace of new forms. I've also heard of poets using memes as poems, right? A colleague of mine, Kyle Booten at I think he's at Dartmouth right now. He creates algorithms that generate poetry. So this, poets and what is poetry continues to grow and evolve. And Aristotle, when he wrote the Poetics, really thought of the poet as also the playwright, as also the art maker, as also the imitator of nature. And so, let's, I think, start thinking outside of the box of whatever we imagine poetry to be, to all of the things that it has been and could be going forward. Let's just completely think about that outside of the box. So thank you for your question, Rosebud.
Awesome, thank you. I think we're about out of time, but I think we have time for one more. So the concept of ancestors comes up a lot in your work, both blood relations, queer ancestors, sometimes a combination of a lot of different kinds of ancestors. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how they have come into your work, influenced your work, um, and what we might expect from your next book as well.
Yeah, ancestors have always been important to me. And I think it's because I'm the youngest person in my family. So I'm the youngest in a line of cousins. I'm the youngest sibling. I'm the youngest of the young. And so I have always, eventually that did change as more people started to have kids, et cetera. But I have always been looking up to the people who've come before me. And my dad is one of 9. And so when I talk about like I have cousins upon cousins upon cousins, we're talking a very big family. And everyone's older than me, and I have just always really appreciated that. I also think that there are elements of African spirituality that are very much a part of my culture. As a Black Panamanian man in a colorful shirt with yellow glasses, or I forgot to give my description earlier, there is a real reverence for ancestors in communities of the African diaspora. And, it's very much tied to spiritual traditions. And so I've always been raised to really value family, to really value your ancestors, and to, appreciate them with every breath that you take, because it's because of them that you are alive. And so I think for me, they walk with me in every step of the way. And so very naturally and organically, they've made their way into these poems. Every time I feel like I'm talking about myself, I'm also talking about this line, right, that I represent and that I'm moving forward. And I hope my kids will move forward one day. And one of the exciting things about um, the tradition of venerating your ancestors is that they are also ancestors that you choose. And so I think about my literary ancestors as well, right? And shout out to the editorial board again, because you're very much alive, but you're also, very much, I claim you as ancestors as well, because I grew up reading so much of your work, Ed Roberson's work, Reginald Gibbon's work, Natasha Trethewey's work, et cetera, et cetera. It's always been feeding me, right, as I've been growing as a writer and as a poet, Chris Abani's work, et cetera. And so, I feel so honored to have been chosen for this prize by this incredible team. Thank you, John Cutler. Thank you, Idalmi. Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone. And keep your eyes peeled for Stepmotherland. It's my full-length collection that will be out soon after Migrant Psalms. And Stepmotherland is a whole new set of poems. And it's won the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize, chosen by John Murillo, and it will be out on Notre Dame University Press in 2021, 2022.
Thank you again so much, Darrel, and the editorial panel at the Drinking Gourd Chapbook Prize. Susanna Gottlieb, Ed Roberson, John Alba Cutler, Chris Abani, Natasha Trethewey, and Reginald Gibbons. And I cannot wait to read your new book. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Good night.